Ocean water around Antarctica can fall to nearly 2 degrees below the freezing point of fresh water. Salt allows the sea to remain liquid at temperatures where lakes would already be solid ice. For warm-blooded animals, that difference changes everything. Water removes heat from the body about 25 times faster than air. A mammal that loses heat faster than it can replace it enters hypothermia within minutes. In polar seas, that risk never disappears. Sea ice spreads across thousands of miles. Winter darkness can last for months without sunrise. Storm winds sweep across the ocean with extraordinary force. And beneath that ice, warm-blooded animals live year after year. Whales larger than any creature on land move through water barely above freezing. Seals dive deep beneath the ice and remain underwater for more than an hour. Penguins plunge into black water to hunt fish far below the frozen surface. Their bodies remain warm the entire time. A whale maintains an internal temperature close to that of a human body while swimming through water almost 40 degrees colder. Heat constantly escapes into the surrounding ocean. Every second becomes a negotiation with physics. This video will examine how warm-blooded animals survive in Earth's coldest oceans. At the far edges of the planet, the ocean changes character. The water darkens, thickens, and settles into a quiet cold that shapes everything that moves within it. Here, the sea becomes part of the polar world, circling continents of ice and stretching toward horizons where sunlight can fade for months at a time. The most extensive of these frigid waters surrounds Antarctica. The Antarctic Ocean forms a vast ring around the southern continent, separating it from the rest of the world's seas. Powerful currents sweep endlessly around this circle, driven by steady winds that travel without interruption across open water. Within this ring, temperatures hover near the freezing point of seawater. Even in the height of summer, the ocean rarely warms beyond a few degrees above that boundary. During winter, the transformation deepens. Sea ice spreads outward from the Antarctic coast, forming enormous floating fields that expand across millions of square kilometers. Some sections become thick plates that grind slowly against one another. Other areas remain thinner, shifting with tides and currents. Beneath this frozen surface, the ocean remains liquid, a hidden landscape of cold darkness where life continues its quiet movements. Far to the north, a different polar ocean forms around the Arctic. Unlike Antarctica, which sits isolated in the middle of water, the Arctic Ocean is surrounded by continents. North America, Europe, and Asia curve around it like distant walls. Yet the conditions within this northern basin mirror the cold severity of the south. Sea ice forms here as well, spreading across the surface each winter. Vast sheets drift across the Arctic Ocean, some lasting for many years before finally breaking apart. In the long winter season, the sun sinks below the horizon and remains absent for weeks or even months. The ocean lies under a dim sky where twilight replaces daylight, and the frozen surface reflects the faint glow of distant stars. These polar seas follow a steady rhythm through the year. As winter tightens its hold, cold air draws heat from the water's surface. Thin crystals of ice begin to appear, forming delicate layers that gradually thicken. The ocean does not freeze all at once. Instead, it grows a shifting skin that expands outward, joining into larger sheets that drift slowly across the surface. When spring arrives, sunlight begins to return. The ice softens and fractures, opening dark channels of water between the floating plates. Summer loosens the frozen grip even further. Large sections break apart and melt, retreating toward the poles until the cycle begins again with the coming cold. The reason this ocean remains liquid through such intense cold lies within the chemistry of seawater itself. Salt dissolves among the water molecules, changing the temperature at which ice forms. Freshwater freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, but seawater must cool several degrees lower before solid ice can appear. In many polar regions, the ocean temperature settles close to -2 degrees Celsius, a narrow margin where the water stays fluid even while ice floats above it. This subtle shift carries immense consequences for the creatures that live there. The sea becomes a reservoir of cold that never fully locks into solid ice. Beneath the frozen surface and the long polar night, a dark ocean continues to move with slow currents and silent tides. Across both poles, these waters form the coldest marine environments on Earth. The Antarctic Ocean and the Arctic Ocean together create immense realms of near-freezing water, shaped by ice, darkness, and the steady turning of the seasons. Within these remote seas, life persists in conditions that press constantly against the limits of warmth. The boundary between warmth and cold in the ocean is not a line that can be seen. It exists instead in the quiet movement of heat, slipping steadily from one place to another. A living body carries warmth within its tissues, while the surrounding sea waits as an immense reservoir of cold. The moment skin meets water, this exchange begins. Air allows warmth to linger. Even in chilly wind, a thin layer of heated air often clings close to the body, slowing the escape of internal heat. Water behaves very differently. Its density presses closely against every surface, leaving no gentle cushion between skin and environment. Heat travels through water with remarkable efficiency, moving away from warm tissues and dispersing into the surrounding sea. The process unfolds through conduction, the simple transfer of thermal energy from warmer material to colder surroundings. Each molecule in the water carries away a small portion of warmth, then passes that energy along to its neighbors. The movement is silent and constant. In cold oceans, this quiet exchange becomes relentless. Because water conducts heat so effectively, warmth leaves the body far more quickly than it would in air. The difference is dramatic. A body immersed in near-freezing seawater can lose heat many times faster than it would under the same temperature in open air. The ocean becomes a vast cooling system that draws warmth away without pause. Warm-blooded animals carry an internal temperature that must remain stable for organs to function properly. Mammals and birds maintain this warmth through metabolism, a continuous conversion of food into energy and heat. Muscles, organs, and circulating blood all contribute to preserving a narrow thermal balance. In polar seas, that balance is constantly under pressure. The surrounding water rests only a few degrees above its freezing point, yet the body temperature of a mammal remains close to 37 degrees Celsius. This difference creates a powerful gradient. Heat naturally flows from the warmer body toward the colder ocean, following the simple laws of physics that govern every exchange of energy. If this loss continues faster than the body can replace it, the internal temperature begins to fall. The condition known as hypothermia emerges gradually as cooling spreads through the tissues and slows the chemical reactions that sustain life. Nerves respond more slowly, muscles weaken, and the rhythm of vital organs becomes uncertain. For animals that depend on warm blood, the ocean therefore presents a constant challenge. Each moment spent swimming, diving, or resting in cold water demands a steady supply of energy. The body must replace every unit of heat that slips away into the surrounding sea. This requirement shapes nearly every aspect of life for warm-blooded creatures in polar oceans. Food becomes fuel, not only for movement, but also for warmth. Metabolism runs steadily, transforming stored energy into the heat that protects delicate internal systems. Birds and mammals share this need, though their bodies differ in form and strategy. Feathers or fur can slow the outward flow of heat, while layers of fat store both insulation and energy reserves. Beneath these protective layers, blood circulates through tissues, that must remain warm enough for cells to function. Even with such defenses, the ocean never ceases its quiet pull on warmth. Cold water presses against skin and feathers, conducting heat away molecule by molecule. The body answers by generating more heat, sustaining an invisible balance that continues for as long as the animal remains alive within the sea. Across polar waters, this exchange continues endlessly. The ocean receives warmth, the body replaces it, and life persists within the narrow space between loss and renewal. Warm blood is a quiet fire carried within living bodies. In the open ocean, that fire must burn steadily, even as the surrounding water draws warmth away from every exposed surface. For animals that breathe air yet spend their lives immersed in the sea, maintaining this inner heat becomes a constant task shaped by the simple geometry of the body itself. Every animal has a boundary where its warmth meets the environment. Skin, feathers, or fur form this delicate border. Heat produced deep within muscles and organs travels outward through tissue until it reaches that surface. Once there, the surrounding water begins to pull it away. Because water presses closely against the body, this exchange occurs across the entire outer surface at once. Each square centimeter becomes a pathway through which warmth can escape. The total area of that surface, therefore, plays a crucial role in how quickly heat disappears. Large animals carry a certain advantage in this quiet contest. As bodies grow larger, their volume increases more quickly than their surface area. A whale, for instance, contains an immense mass of warm tissue within a relatively smaller outer boundary. Heat generated inside must travel farther before reaching the surface, and the proportion of exposed area is smaller compared with the warmth stored inside. This relationship between surface area and volume shapes the way animals interact with cold environments. A large marine mammal can retain warmth more effectively simply because of its scale. The body becomes a reservoir of heat that cools slowly, even when surrounded by frigid water. Smaller animals live under different conditions. Their bodies contain far less internal mass, yet their outer surface remains relatively large compared with the heat stored within. Warmth travels a shorter distance before reaching the boundary where water carries it away. The result is a rapid exchange with the environment. Small bodies lose heat quickly because a greater proportion of their warmth lies close to the surface. In cold oceans, this creates a difficult balance. Energy must be converted into heat at a pace that keeps internal systems stable, despite the constant drain imposed by the surrounding water. Movement through the sea intensifies this process. As an animal swims, fresh layers of cold water continually flow across the body. Each passing current removes the thin layer of warmed water that might otherwise linger near the surface. New cold water replaces it, ready to absorb more heat. This steady renewal prevents warmth from accumulating around the body. Instead, heat disperses quickly into the surrounding ocean. Swimming animals, therefore, face a continuous exchange between their internal warmth and the moving water that surrounds them. Body shape also influences how heat escapes. Streamlined forms help animals move efficiently through the sea, yet these same shapes expose broad surfaces to the surrounding water. Flippers, tails, and extended limbs increase the area through which heat can travel outward. These structures are essential for swimming and steering, yet they present additional pathways for warmth to slip away. For smaller mammals or birds that enter cold seas, the challenge becomes particularly intense. Their limited body mass provides little stored warmth, while their active movements accelerate the flow of water across their surfaces. Each dive or swim carries with it a constant transfer of energy from the body into the ocean. Over time, this exchange shapes the ways different animals survive in polar waters. Some species grow large, their bodies expanding into immense stores of retained warmth. Others develop specialized layers that slow the outward movement of heat. Still others rely on remarkable behaviors and metabolic rhythms that compensate for the rapid cooling imposed by their smaller size. Within the quiet cold of the ocean, warmth becomes a precious resource carried inside living tissue. The geometry of the body determines how quickly that warmth escapes, and each species moves through the sea within the limits set by its size, its shape, and the steady pull of the surrounding water. Beneath the smooth skin of many marine mammals lies a layer unlike any found in animals that live on land. This layer forms a quiet boundary between the warmth of living tissue and the cold pressure of the surrounding sea. Known as blubber, it rests just below the skin, spreading across the body like a flexible shield that serves several purposes at once. At first glance, blubber resembles ordinary body fat, yet its structure reveals something more specialized. The cells within this tissue are densely packed with lipids, forming thick sheets that can extend many centimeters beneath the skin. Fibrous connective strands weave through the layer, binding it securely to muscles below while allowing enough flexibility for swimming. The result is a material that behaves both as insulation and as a living storehouse of energy. Unlike the thin deposits of fat found in many terrestrial mammals, blubber forms a continuous blanket around much of the body. In large whales, this layer can reach extraordinary thickness. Some species carry blubber that measures more than half a meter from skin to muscle. Even smaller marine mammals maintain impressive layers. Seals often possess blubber thick enough to transform the shape of their bodies into smooth, rounded forms that glide easily through water. This dense tissue slows the outward movement of heat generated within the body. Warm blood circulates through muscles and organs beneath the blubber, while the fatty layer above acts as a barrier that resists the passage of thermal energy. Heat traveling outward encounters this insulating mass and disperses slowly as it passes through the lipid-rich structure. Because lipids conduct heat less efficiently than surrounding tissues, the flow of warmth toward the skin becomes gradual. The internal environment of the body remains stable, while the outer surface adjusts to the surrounding water. In this way, blubber creates a protective gradient between living warmth and the cold sea beyond. Energy storage forms another quiet function within this layer. The lipids packed inside blubber represent concentrated reserves of fuel. When food becomes scarce or long journeys demand sustained effort, marine mammals draw upon these stored molecules. Metabolism converts the lipids into energy that supports both movement and the continuous generation of internal heat. For animals that travel vast distances or dive repeatedly into deep water, these reserves become essential. Feeding seasons allow whales and seals to build thick layers of blubber by consuming enormous quantities of prey. During periods when food is less abundant, the stored energy gradually decreases as the body transforms those lipids into metabolic fuel. Blubber also influences how a marine mammal moves through the water. Lipids possess a density lower than that of seawater, which introduces a subtle buoyant effect. The presence of a thick blubber layer helps support the body in the surrounding ocean, reducing the effort required to remain afloat. This buoyancy works quietly alongside muscular motion, easing the energetic demands of life at sea. Flexibility remains equally important. Unlike rigid insulation, blubber bends and shifts with each movement of the body. As whales arc through the water or seals twist during pursuit of prey, the layer stretches and compresses without restricting motion. This adaptability allows marine mammals to maintain both insulation and agility. Across the polar oceans, the presence of blubber transforms the relationship between warm-blooded animals and their environment. The layer becomes a living interface where warmth, energy, and buoyancy quietly interact. Beneath the cold surface of the sea, this remarkable tissue allows bodies to carry their heat through water that would otherwise draw it away with relentless speed. Along the cold margins of the ocean, two very different solutions to the problem of warmth quietly coexist. Some animals rely on dense fur that traps delicate pockets of air close to the skin. Others carry thick internal layers that insulate from within. Both approaches protect warm blood in icy seas, yet the methods reflect very different paths shaped by evolution. Sea otters offer one of the most remarkable examples of fur-based insulation in the marine world. Their bodies lack the heavy internal lipid layers carried by many larger marine mammals. Instead, they depend almost entirely on the extraordinary density of their fur. Each square centimeter of an otter's coat holds hundreds of thousands of fine hairs, making it among the most tightly packed fur in the animal kingdom. This dense covering creates a protective structure that holds a thin layer of air between the skin and the surrounding water. The trapped air acts as insulation, slowing the movement of heat outward from the body. When an otter dives beneath the surface, the fur compresses slightly, yet the structure remains intact enough to preserve this insulating barrier. Maintaining this air layer requires constant care. Sea otters spend long periods grooming their coats, carefully cleaning and aligning the fur so that the fine hairs continue to trap air effectively. Oils from the skin help keep the outer surface water resistant, preventing the ocean from soaking through to the inner layers. Through this delicate system, the otter carries warmth within a protective envelope of air, rather than relying on thick internal insulation. Yet, this strategy comes with certain limits. If the fur becomes damaged or heavily contaminated, the insulating layer can collapse. Without that protective air, the cold sea would reach the skin far more quickly. In contrast, many seals follow a very different approach. Instead of relying on fur to hold warmth, they possess substantial internal layers of lipid-rich tissue beneath the skin. This blubber forms a continuous thermal shield that slows the escape of heat from the body. The animal does not depend on trapped air or surface grooming to maintain insulation. Because this protection lies beneath the skin, it remains effective even during long dives through deep water. Seals can spend extended periods submerged without losing their insulation. The thick internal layer also serves as a source of stored energy, supporting metabolism during times when food becomes less available. The contrast between these two systems reveals how different evolutionary paths respond to the same environmental challenge. Sea otters inhabit coastal regions where their agile bodies move among rocks, kelp forests, and shallow waters. Dense fur allows flexibility and buoyancy without the heavy mass associated with thick internal lipid layers. Seals, by comparison, often travel through open seas and beneath floating ice. Their bodies benefit from the stability and energy reserves provided by blubber. The internal insulation remains reliable regardless of depth or pressure, allowing these animals to pursue prey far below the surface. Each strategy carries trade-offs shaped by lifestyle and environment. Fur insulation depends on meticulous grooming and remains vulnerable if the delicate air-trapping structure breaks down. Blubber insulation offers greater consistency underwater but requires large reserves of stored lipids that increase body mass. Across the cold oceans, these different approaches illustrate how life adapts through diverse solutions. One animal wraps itself in a living coat that holds warmth within a cushion of air. Another carries a thick internal layer that shields the body from the surrounding sea. Through these contrasting strategies, warm blood continues to endure within waters that would otherwise drain heat with quiet persistence. Inside the bodies of many marine animals, warmth travels through an intricate network of flowing blood. This quiet circulation carries oxygen, nutrients, and energy to every corner of the body. Yet in cold oceans, it serves another purpose as well, guiding heat along carefully arranged pathways that protect vital organs from the surrounding chill. Blood leaving the heart moves through arteries, carrying warmth produced deep within muscles and internal tissues. As this blood travels outward toward flippers, fins, or feet, it approaches regions where the surrounding water can easily draw heat away. These outer parts of the body often lie closest to the sea, exposed to temperatures far below the warmth maintained near the core. If warm arterial blood flowed directly to these extremities without regulation, large amounts of heat would escape into the surrounding water. Each movement of the animal would release precious warmth through its limbs. Over time, the loss could become severe, especially during long periods of swimming or diving. Many marine mammals and birds avoid this problem through a remarkable arrangement known as countercurrent heat exchange. Within certain parts of the body, arteries carrying warm blood run closely beside veins, returning cooler blood back toward the heart. These vessels lie side by side, sometimes winding together in tight bundles. As warm blood moves outward through the arteries, it passes alongside the cooler blood traveling inward through neighboring veins. Heat naturally flows between them. Instead of escaping directly into the environment, warmth transfers from the outgoing arterial blood into the returning venous blood. This exchange creates a quiet recycling system inside the body. By the time arterial blood reaches the extremities, much of its warmth has already shifted into the veins that carry blood back toward the core. The outer tissues, therefore, receive blood that is cooler than the body's internal temperature. Because the blood arriving at the extremities is cooler, less heat escapes into the surrounding water. Meanwhile, the veins carry the recovered warmth back toward the heart and internal organs, where it helps maintain the stable temperature required for vital functions. The outer limbs remain colder than the rest of the body, yet the essential internal systems remain protected. This arrangement allows marine animals to move their flippers, fins, or feet through cold water without surrendering excessive warmth from their core. In whales, this system operates through networks of blood vessels that thread through the flippers and tail. The massive body maintains its internal warmth, while the outer appendages adjust to the surrounding water. The flippers may feel cool compared with the animal's internal tissues, yet the organs deep within remain stable and warm. Seals rely on similar arrangements within their limbs. As they swim or maneuver through icy seas, the vessels within their flippers guide heat through the same countercurrent pathways. Warmth that might otherwise disappear into the water circulates back toward the body's center. Penguins demonstrate this strategy in their feet and flippers as they move between sea and ice. Blood vessels running through these narrow structures form intricate exchanges where heat shifts quietly between arteries and veins. The feet that rest on frozen surfaces remain cool, while the warmth needed for the bird's internal systems stays safely within the body. Through this subtle architecture of flowing blood, marine animals conserve energy in environments that constantly draw warmth away. Heat travels not only outward but also inward along these paired pathways, circulating through vessels that act as living conduits of thermal balance. Beneath skin, feathers, or blubber, this invisible exchange continues with every heartbeat. Warmth moves between vessels, circulates through tissues, and returns to the body's center, sustaining life within waters that remain cold without end. Far below the restless surface, a whale can travel through water where sunlight fades into a dim blue twilight. In these depths, the animal moves slowly and deliberately, its enormous body sustained by a hidden chemistry carried within blood and muscle. The secret to this endurance lies not only in the lungs that draw air at the surface, but in specialized molecules stored deep inside the tissues. Whale muscles contain extraordinary concentrations of myoglobin, a protein that binds oxygen within the fibers that power movement. While hemoglobin in the blood transports oxygen from the lungs to the rest of the body, myoglobin acts as a reserve held directly inside the muscle cells themselves. Each molecule carries oxygen in a form that remains available when external supplies begin to diminish. This storage system allows whales to carry a large internal supply of oxygen even after the last breath at the surface has been taken. As the animal descends, the oxygen bound to hemoglobin and myoglobin continues to support the slow contraction of powerful muscles. Swimming strokes remain steady while the body moves through colder and darker layers of the sea. Because of this remarkable capacity, whales can dive to impressive depths and remain submerged for extended periods. Some species spend nearly an hour beneath the surface, while others are capable of even longer descents during deep foraging journeys. During these dives, the animal relies on the oxygen already carried within its blood and tissues. The distribution of oxygen within the body shifts carefully as the dive progresses. Circulation prioritizes the brain, heart, and the major muscles required for movement. Other systems operate at a reduced level, conserving oxygen for the organs that must remain continuously active. At the same time, the whale's metabolism begins to slow. Heart rate decreases, sometimes dramatically, as the body enters a state known as bradycardia. Each heartbeat becomes slower and more deliberate, reducing the rate at which oxygen is consumed. Blood flow narrows toward essential organs, while less critical regions receive smaller supplies. This reduction in metabolic activity extends throughout the body. Cells consume oxygen at a slower pace, allowing the stored reserves to last longer during the dive. The whale moves with calm efficiency, avoiding unnecessary bursts of energy that would quickly deplete its internal oxygen supply. Muscle tissue plays a particularly important role in this process. The high concentration of myoglobin allows oxygen to remain available even when circulating blood levels begin to decline. As the dive deepens, oxygen gradually releases from the myoglobin molecules, supporting muscle activity during the long descent and eventual ascent. The dense presence of myoglobin also gives whale muscles their dark coloration. These tissues appear almost black when exposed, a visual reflection of the enormous oxygen storage contained within each fiber. This biochemical adaptation forms one of the foundations that allows whales to explore depths far beyond the reach of most air-breathing animals. Conserving oxygen during a dive also helps reduce the production of excess body heat. With metabolism slowed and movements measured, the whale maintains a stable internal environment while traveling through cold water far below the surface. The careful balance between oxygen storage and energy use supports both endurance and thermal stability. Within the immense bodies of these marine giants, chemistry and physiology work together with quiet precision. Myoglobin-filled muscles hold oxygen in reserve. Circulation adjusts to shifting demands, and metabolism slows into an efficient rhythm that stretches each breath into a long underwater journey. In this way, the whale carries its own atmosphere within its blood and muscles, allowing it to wander through deep waters while remaining sustained by the invisible stores held inside living tissue. Where sea and ice meet along the southern edge of the world, small black and white figures slip from the frozen shore into the dark ocean. Penguins enter the water with an ease that hides the severe conditions surrounding them. Beneath the surface, they swim through seas cold enough to challenge any warm-blooded creature, yet their bodies remain protected by a remarkable combination of structure, chemistry, and behavior. The first layer of this protection appears in the feathers that cover the entire body. Unlike the loose plumage of many birds, penguin feathers grow in dense, overlapping rows that form a tightly packed surface. Each feather is short and stiff, shaped to lie smoothly against its neighbors so that the outer body becomes a nearly continuous shield. Beneath the visible surface lies an additional structure. The feathers trap a thin layer of air close to the skin, forming a subtle buffer between the bird and the surrounding water. This trapped air reduces the direct contact between skin and sea, slowing the outward movement of heat produced within the body. Even during long swims, this invisible cushion remains an important part of the penguin's thermal defense. The outer feathers carry another property that helps maintain this protective layer. Their surfaces are coated with oils produced by a gland near the base of the tail. As penguins preen, they spread these oils across the feathers, creating a waterproof barrier that prevents seawater from penetrating deep into the plumage. Water beads and rolls away, preserving the insulating air beneath. When a penguin dives, the surrounding pressure compresses the trapped air slightly, yet the structure of the feathers allows the insulation to persist. The bird moves through the water with streamlined efficiency while still retaining a protective boundary between its body and the freezing sea. Below the feathers lies another source of warmth. Penguins carry substantial reserves of body fat stored beneath the skin. These lipid-rich tissues provide both insulation and energy. The layer slows the loss of heat from the body's interior while also serving as a reserve that can be metabolized when food becomes scarce. For many species, these fat stores fluctuate through the seasons. During periods of abundant food, penguins build substantial reserves by feeding on fish, krill, and squid. The stored energy supports long journeys at sea and helps maintain warmth during times when hunting becomes more difficult. Behavior also plays an important role in preserving heat. Penguins often regulate their posture and movement to reduce exposure to cold air and water. When resting on the ice, they may tuck their flippers close to the body and lean forward onto their heels and tail. This position reduces the contact between their warm surfaces and the frozen ground beneath them. In large colonies, another behavior emerges. Penguins gather together in tightly packed groups, forming clusters where individuals share body warmth. The birds along the outer edge gradually rotate inward, while others move outward, allowing the group to distribute warmth among its members without any single individual remaining exposed for long. Even in the water, movement itself contributes to warmth. Swimming muscles generate heat as they contract, adding to the thermal balance maintained by feathers and fat. The penguin's body remains active and efficient, producing energy that supports both motion and internal stability. Through these combined adaptations, penguins move between ice and ocean with quiet resilience. Feathers form a dense insulating layer. Waterproof oils protect the trapped air beneath. Fat reserves support both warmth and endurance, and subtle behaviors reduce unnecessary heat loss. Within the frozen seas of the southern world, these small birds carry their warmth through water that remains relentlessly cold. Their survival reflects a careful harmony between structure, physiology, and behavior, each element working together to preserve the steady warmth of life. Winter settles over Antarctica with a silence that stretches across the frozen continent and the surrounding sea. During this season, the sun sinks below the horizon for long periods, leaving the ice under a dim sky where only faint twilight brushes the surface. Temperatures fall deeply below freezing, and winds sweep across the ice fields with steady force. Within this austere landscape, emperor penguins begin one of the most remarkable life cycles found anywhere on Earth. Unlike many animals that breed during gentler seasons, emperor penguins begin their reproductive cycle as the Antarctic winter approaches. Adults travel across vast stretches of sea ice toward traditional breeding grounds that may lie far from open water. The journey often unfolds over many kilometers, each step carrying the birds deeper into the frozen interior. By the time the colony gathers, darkness has already begun to dominate the sky. Hundreds or sometimes thousands of penguins assemble on stable ice where the surface remains firm through the long winter months. Here the adults form close communities, standing shoulder to shoulder while the cold wind moves across the plain. After courtship, each female lays a single egg. The transfer of that egg becomes a delicate moment. It must move carefully from the female's feet to those of the male without touching the frozen ground. Once the egg rests on the male's feet, it is covered by a fold of warm skin known as the brood pouch. Beneath this protective layer, the developing chick remains sheltered from the surrounding cold. Soon afterward, the female begins a long journey back toward the open sea to feed. The male remains behind, balancing the egg on his feet while enduring the heart of the Antarctic winter. During this period, he may go many weeks without food, relying on energy reserves stored within his body. While the males keep watch over their eggs, the colony organizes itself into dense formations. Penguins press together in shifting groups where individuals share warmth through close contact. Birds along the outer edge gradually rotate toward the center, while others move outward, allowing the entire colony to endure the harsh winds without any one penguin remaining exposed for too long. Far away at the edge of the ice, the females feed in the frigid ocean. They dive repeatedly through dark water in search of fish, squid, and krill. These hunting journeys may carry them deep beneath the surface, where prey gathers in the dim layers below. Powerful strokes of their flippers propel them downward, while their bodies remain adapted for efficient swimming in cold seas. After weeks of feeding, the females return to the colony carrying food stored within their stomachs. By this time, the eggs held by the males begin to hatch. Small chicks emerge into a world of wind and darkness, still fragile and dependent on the warmth provided by their parents. When the females arrive, the adults exchange roles. The returning parent feeds the chick with regurgitated food, while the male, weakened from his long fast, begins the journey back to the ocean to hunt. Through this careful partnership, the parents alternate between guarding the chick and traveling to the sea for nourishment. The chick grows slowly within the protection of the colony. For many weeks, it remains sheltered beneath the brood pouch of one parent or the other. Even as the Antarctic winter continues, the shared warmth of the adults allows the young bird to survive temperatures that would quickly overwhelm an unprotected body. Gradually, the long darkness begins to ease. Light returns to the Antarctic sky, and the sea ice begins its slow transformation as spring approaches. By this time, the chicks have grown larger, their bodies strong enough to withstand the cold air beyond the shelter of their parents. Within this remote and frozen world, emperor penguins carry out a life cycle synchronized with the harshest season of the year. Their endurance emerges through cooperation, careful timing, and remarkable physiological resilience, allowing new life to begin even as winter holds the Antarctic in its cold embrace. Across the silent stretches of polar seas, seals move through the water with a quiet efficiency that reveals years of adaptation to a demanding world. Their bodies glide smoothly beneath the surface, shaped for life in an ocean where warmth must be carefully preserved and every dive requires careful control of energy. A seal's body carries a substantial layer of blubber beneath the skin, forming one of the most important defenses against the cold ocean. This thick tissue surrounds much of the torso and limbs, creating a flexible shield that slows the outward flow of internal heat. Beneath this layer, the muscles and organs continue their work in a stable environment, protected from the surrounding water that presses close against the animal's body. The thickness of this blubber varies among species and seasons. During times when prey is abundant, seals feed heavily and build large reserves of stored lipids within this layer. The additional mass provides increased insulation while also serving as a reserve of energy that can support long dives and periods when food becomes less available. While this insulating tissue protects warmth, the seal's body also displays remarkable adaptations for exploring the depths below the ice. Many species are capable of descending far beneath the surface, reaching depths where light fades and the water grows colder still. These dives allow seals to pursue fish and other prey that gather in hidden layers of the ocean. The ability to remain submerged for extended periods depends on a carefully coordinated set of physiological changes. As a seal begins its descent, its heart rate gradually slows. The rhythmic pulse that carries blood through the body becomes less frequent, conserving oxygen that would otherwise be consumed more quickly. This slowing of the heartbeat allows oxygen stored within the blood and muscles to last longer during the dive. Circulation adjusts so that essential organs continue to receive the oxygen they require, while other tissues reduce their activity and demand less energy. Through this quiet redistribution, the seal extends the time it can remain beneath the surface. Muscle tissues also contain molecules capable of holding oxygen within their fibers. These reserves support movement during long underwater pursuits, allowing the animal to swim steadily through the dark water while searching for prey. The seal's body becomes a carefully balanced system where stored oxygen and slowed metabolism work together to sustain the dive. In polar regions, seals often hunt beneath extensive layers of sea ice. The frozen surface above creates a roof that blocks direct access to open air. Yet within this environment, seals have learned to navigate the underwater landscape with precision. Some species maintain breathing holes in the ice, carefully locating these openings after each dive. Below the ice, fish and other small animals gather in the sheltered waters where currents carry nutrients and microscopic life. Seals move quietly through these hidden spaces, using their sensitive whiskers to detect subtle movements in the water. Vibrations created by swimming prey travel through the surrounding sea and reach these specialized sensory hairs. Guided by these signals, the seal can pursue prey even in dim conditions where vision becomes limited. Powerful strokes of its flippers propel the body forward, while the streamlined shape reduces resistance as the animal glides through the water. Throughout each dive, the seal balances several demands at once. Heat must remain protected within the body, oxygen must be carefully conserved, and movement must remain efficient enough to locate food beneath the ice. The blubber layer provides insulation and energy reserves, while slowed heart rhythms and stored oxygen support the extended time spent underwater. Within the cold oceans that surround the poles, seals have become masters of this delicate balance. Their bodies unite insulation, physiology, and sensory awareness into a system perfectly suited for life beneath frozen seas. In the southernmost seas, where winter ice thickens into broad white plains, Weddell seals spend much of their lives beneath a ceiling of frozen water. The world above may appear silent and immovable, yet below the ice lies a shifting ocean where these seals travel through corridors of dim blue light and shadow. The Antarctic pack ice can grow thick during the colder months, forming layers strong enough to support drifting snow and the weight of resting animals. Beneath this frozen surface, the sea remains open, and Weddell seals move through these submerged spaces with steady confidence. Their bodies slip easily through the cold water, guided by instincts refined through generations of life in this unusual environment. Breathing beneath such ice requires careful preparation. Weddell seals maintain access to air through breathing holes that connect the ocean below with the atmosphere above. These openings may form naturally in thin ice, or they may be maintained by the seals themselves. Using their strong teeth, the animals scrape away new ice that forms along the edges, preserving a narrow passage between water and air. These breathing holes become essential landmarks within the frozen seascape. A seal may descend beneath the ice and travel considerable distances through the dark water before returning to one of these openings to breathe. The reliability of these air portals allows the animal to hunt far from the exact point where it entered the sea. Once submerged, Weddell seals demonstrate remarkable endurance. Their dives frequently extend well beyond half an hour, and some individuals remain underwater for more than an hour before resurfacing. During these journeys, the seal's body enters a controlled physiological state that conserves both oxygen and energy. The heart rate slows as the animal descends, allowing the stored oxygen carried in the blood and muscles to last longer. Circulation prioritizes the brain and the powerful muscles that drive swimming. Other tissues reduce their activity, using less oxygen and allowing the seal to extend its time beneath the surface. These long dives carry the animal through waters that often lie in near darkness. Sunlight filtering through thick ice becomes faint and diffuse, leaving the underwater landscape illuminated only by a soft, shifting glow. As depth increases, even this dim light fades until the surroundings grow quiet and shadowed. Within this environment, Weddell seals rely on senses well suited to the subtle signals of the sea. Their whiskers, known as vibrissae, respond to the slightest disturbances in the water. Movements made by fish or other prey create gentle currents that travel through the surrounding fluid. These signals reach the sensitive whiskers, allowing the seal to detect the presence and direction of nearby animals. Guided by these delicate cues, the seal glides through the water with smooth, efficient strokes of its flippers. Prey may gather along the underside of the ice or swim through the deeper layers below. The seal moves patiently through these hidden pathways, searching the dim water for opportunities to feed. Despite the long distances traveled during a dive, the seal must eventually locate one of the breathing holes that connect the ocean to the air above. Memory and spatial awareness guide the animal through the maze beneath the ice. Returning to the familiar opening, it rises gently upward until its head breaks through the water and the first breath of fresh air fills its lungs. After only a short pause at the surface, the seal may descend again, continuing its exploration beneath the frozen ceiling. Within this world of cold water and drifting light, Weddell seals maintain a rhythm of diving, hunting, and breathing that allows them to thrive beneath one of the most formidable environments on Earth. Across the immense polar seas, some of the largest animals ever to exist on Earth move quietly through waters that remain near the limits of freezing. Their presence feels almost improbable against the cold vastness that surrounds them. Blue whales, humpback whales, and minke whales travel through these distant oceans each year, drawn by rhythms that connect distant regions of the planet. The journey that brings them here often begins far from the poles. During warmer seasons, many whales inhabit lower latitude waters where breeding and the early stages of life unfold. Yet, as the year progresses, powerful migratory instincts guide them toward the high latitudes, where food becomes extraordinarily abundant. In these polar seas, vast blooms of microscopic life appear when sunlight returns to the ocean surface after the long winter. Tiny plants known as phytoplankton multiply rapidly, transforming the upper layers of the water into a rich feeding ground. This sudden abundance supports enormous populations of small crustaceans, especially krill, which gather in dense swarms that drift through the cold currents. Whales arrive in these regions to take advantage of this seasonal feast. Blue whales, the largest animals known to have lived, move slowly through the water with bodies that can stretch more than 20 meters in length. Their immense mouths open wide as they glide through clouds of krill, filtering enormous quantities of prey with specialized baleen plates. Humpback whales travel these same waters, their long flippers guiding graceful turns as they pursue similar prey. Groups sometimes cooperate during feeding, creating swirling columns of bubbles beneath schools of krill or fish before rising upward to capture them. Nearby, the smaller minke whales weave through the cold sea with swift movements, hunting with a speed and agility that suits their more compact size. Although these species differ in behavior and scale, they share one important advantage in the frigid environment. Their immense bodies retain warmth with remarkable efficiency. As body size increases, the volume of internal tissue grows faster than the outer surface exposed to the surrounding water. This simple geometric relationship allows larger animals to conserve heat more effectively than smaller ones. Within the enormous bodies of whales, muscles and organs generate warmth through steady metabolic activity. The heat produced within this deep mass disperses slowly toward the skin, protected by thick layers of insulating tissue. Even while swimming through water that remains intensely cold, the internal environment of the whale stays stable. This advantage becomes particularly important during the long feeding seasons in polar regions. Whales spend extended periods moving through the ocean in search of prey, often diving repeatedly through layers of cold water where krill gather. The vast internal mass of the body helps maintain warmth during these activities, reducing the rate at which heat escapes into the surrounding sea. Large size also allows whales to store significant reserves of energy within their tissues. These stores accumulate during periods of abundant feeding in polar waters. Later in the year, when the whales migrate toward breeding grounds where food may be scarce, the stored energy supports both movement and metabolic needs. Through this cycle of migration and feeding, whales connect distant parts of the ocean into a single seasonal pattern. Their journeys carry them between warm and cold seas, guided by the shifting availability of food that emerges each year in polar waters. Within the coldest oceans of Earth, these enormous animals thrive not by resisting the environment alone, but by growing into bodies capable of maintaining warmth despite the surrounding chill. Their scale, physiology, and migratory behavior allow them to move confidently through waters that would challenge smaller creatures. As they travel through the polar seas, blue whales, humpbacks, and minkes embody a quiet principle of life in cold oceans. Sometimes survival emerges not through speed or shelter, but through the sheer magnitude of the body itself, carrying warmth within a living mass that the cold sea cannot easily claim. Among animals that inhabit the coldest oceans, size itself becomes a quiet form of protection. The scale of the body shapes how warmth is produced, stored, and gradually released into the surrounding environment. Within these frigid waters, physical dimensions influence survival in ways that reach deep into the mathematics of living tissue. Every warm-blooded animal generates heat through metabolism. Muscles, organs, and circulating blood constantly release thermal energy as they perform the work required for life. This warmth spreads through the body's interior, forming a stable environment where cells function efficiently. Yet, the body is never completely isolated from the world beyond its skin. Heat moves outward through tissues until it reaches the surface, where it begins to disperse into the surrounding environment. The rate of this outward movement depends strongly on the relationship between surface area and internal volume. Surface area represents the outer boundary where heat can escape. Volume represents the mass of tissue inside that produces and holds warmth. As an animal grows larger, these two measurements change at different rates. Volume increases rapidly as the body expands, while surface area grows more slowly. This imbalance creates a natural advantage for larger animals in cold environments. A greater volume means more heat produced and stored within the body. At the same time, the proportionally smaller surface area limits how quickly that warmth can escape into the surrounding water. For small animals, the situation unfolds differently. Their bodies contain less internal mass relative to their outer surface. Heat generated inside travels only a short distance before reaching the skin, where it can dissipate rapidly into the environment. Maintaining a stable internal temperature therefore requires greater metabolic effort. Within cold oceans, this simple geometric principle shapes the distribution of life. Many marine mammals have evolved toward large body sizes that help preserve warmth in water that constantly draws heat away. Their massive forms allow them to maintain stable internal conditions even while moving through seas that remain intensely cold. Whales represent the most dramatic expression of this pattern. The enormous scale of their bodies creates vast internal reservoirs of warmth. Heat produced within muscles and organs spreads slowly through thick layers of tissue before reaching the skin. This gradual transfer allows the internal environment to remain steady despite the surrounding chill. Seals also benefit from substantial body mass, though their scale differs from that of whales. Their rounded forms combine size with insulating tissues that further slow the outward flow of heat. Even during extended dives in cold water, the internal warmth of the body remains carefully preserved. Evolution gradually shaped these forms over millions of years. Early ancestors of marine mammals once lived primarily on land, where thermal conditions differed greatly from those found in polar seas. As certain lineages returned to the ocean, natural selection favored individuals whose bodies could maintain warmth in water that removed heat efficiently. Larger body sizes offered clear advantages in this environment. Animals with greater mass retained warmth more effectively, allowing them to swim, hunt, and migrate through colder waters with less energy devoted solely to temperature regulation. Over generations, these advantages influenced the evolutionary pathways of many marine species. The result appears today in the impressive scale of numerous ocean-dwelling mammals. Their bodies reflect the gradual shaping of form through the persistent influence of cold water. Each layer of tissue, each increase in size, contributes to a system that balances warmth against the surrounding sea. Within these vast oceans, survival often depends not only on behavior or physiology, but on the fundamental proportions of the body itself. Size becomes a silent ally, allowing warmth to remain within living tissue even as the cold waters of the planet continue their quiet pull beyond the skin. Within the quiet interior of a warm-blooded body, rivers of blood travel through vessels that reach every tissue. This constant circulation carries oxygen and nutrients, yet it also moves warmth from one region to another. In cold oceans and polar air, the body carefully regulates these flows, guiding heat toward the places where it is most needed. The circulatory system behaves with remarkable flexibility when animals encounter extreme cold. Blood vessels near the surface of the body can narrow through a process known as vasoconstriction. When this occurs, the muscular walls of the vessels tighten slightly, reducing the amount of blood that moves through these outer regions. This adjustment changes how heat moves through the body. Blood leaving the heart carries warmth, generated by metabolism deep within muscles and organs. If that warm blood flows freely through the outer limbs, heat can escape rapidly into the surrounding environment. By narrowing the vessels that lead to these exposed areas, the body slows the delivery of warm blood to the surface. As circulation decreases in these outer tissues, more warmth remains concentrated in the central regions of the body. The brain, heart, and other vital organs continue receiving a steady supply of blood at normal temperatures. These organs must remain stable for life to continue, and the body's circulatory adjustments help ensure that their environment remains carefully regulated. In marine mammals and birds that move through cold water, this process unfolds constantly. Flippers, feet, and other extremities experience the surrounding chill first. The vessels within these areas respond by constricting, allowing less warm blood to reach the outermost tissues. The temperature of these extremities gradually approaches that of the environment. Allowing these outer parts of the body to cool slightly reduces the amount of heat lost from the core. The animal's internal warmth remains concentrated around the organs where it is essential. This strategy conserves energy that would otherwise be required to replace heat continually escaping through exposed surfaces. Despite this cooling, the body must still protect these tissues from damage. If circulation were reduced completely, cells could suffer from lack of oxygen and nutrients. Instead, blood flow adjusts in subtle cycles. Periodically, the vessels relax and allow warmer blood to return briefly to the extremities. This intermittent circulation helps maintain the health of the tissues while still limiting overall heat loss. In polar birds, such as penguins, these adjustments occur within the vessels that supply the feet and flippers. When standing on ice or swimming in cold water, circulation shifts so that the body core remains warm while the extremities tolerate cooler conditions. The tissues adapt to these lower temperatures without injury. Marine mammals display similar control within their flippers and tails. Blood flow adjusts continuously as the animal swims, dives, or rests at the surface. Through this careful regulation, warmth remains focused within the body's central systems, even while the outer surfaces interact with the surrounding cold. The prevention of frost damage depends on this delicate balance between conservation and supply. Cells require oxygen carried by blood, yet too much circulation would carry warmth away from the organs that must remain stable. The body resolves this challenge through constant adjustments in vessel diameter, allowing circulation to shift moment by moment. Through these quiet changes in blood flow, animals living in polar seas maintain a stable internal environment despite the severe conditions around them. Warmth moves through the body in carefully directed pathways, guided by vessels that narrow and relax as needed. Within this living network of circulation, heat becomes a resource that can be conserved, redirected, and protected. The body's ability to control its own rivers of blood allows life to continue, even in waters and winds that would otherwise claim warmth without pause. Far beneath the surface, the ocean becomes a place of quiet stillness where motion slows and energy is carefully preserved. For many marine mammals and birds, descending into deeper water does more than reveal new hunting grounds. The act of diving itself becomes a subtle way to protect warmth and conserve the precious energy required for life in cold seas. At the surface, the body constantly interacts with shifting winds, waves, and currents. These movements increase the exchange of heat between the animal and its environment. Water flowing rapidly across the skin can carry warmth away with persistent efficiency. By moving into deeper layers where conditions are often calmer, animals encounter water that changes more slowly around them. During a dive, activity often becomes more measured. Strong bursts of movement at the beginning of the descent gradually give way to long gliding phases where the animal allows gravity and buoyancy to assist its motion. Marine mammals such as seals and whales frequently alternate between gentle strokes and extended periods of passive gliding. This change in movement reduces the amount of muscular effort required to travel through the water. Because muscles consume oxygen and generate metabolic activity, lowering the intensity of movement also lowers the overall energy demand of the body. Each glide becomes a quiet interval where warmth can be preserved rather than spent. Physiological adjustments accompany these changes in behavior. As a dive deepens, the body enters a state where metabolic processes begin to slow. The heart beats less frequently, circulation becomes more focused on essential organs, and many tissues reduce their oxygen consumption. These shifts allow the animal to extend the time it can remain underwater while using energy more efficiently. A lower metabolic rate also means that the body produces less excess heat that must be managed or dissipated. Instead, the warmth already present within muscles and organs is maintained with careful balance. The animal's internal systems continue their work, but at a pace that conserves both oxygen and energy. For species that dive regularly in polar oceans, this rhythm becomes a central part of daily life. Penguins descending in search of fish often glide through sections of their underwater journeys, allowing momentum to carry them forward. Seals exploring beneath sea ice adopt similar patterns, combining gentle strokes with extended drifting movement. These strategies help prevent unnecessary loss of energy in environments where food may be distant and the cold constantly challenges the body's thermal balance. By reducing muscular effort and slowing internal processes, animals limit the rate at which stored energy must be converted into heat and movement. Depth itself can contribute to this conservation. As animals descend, pressure gradually compresses air trapped within feathers or lungs, altering buoyancy in ways that encourage gliding rather than constant swimming. The body naturally settles into a smooth downward path where minimal effort is required to continue the descent. Eventually, the dive reaches a turning point where the animal begins its return toward the surface. Even during this ascent, efficient movement remains essential. Stored oxygen and energy must last until fresh air is reached again, so the body maintains its quiet balance between motion and conservation. Through countless dives over the course of their lives, marine animals refine this rhythm of descent, glide, and return. Each dive becomes an opportunity to gather food while carefully preserving the energy needed to remain warm in cold oceans. Within the deep water, where movement slows and light fades, diving becomes more than a means of hunting. It becomes a carefully tuned strategy that allows warm-blooded animals to manage both energy and heat, sustaining life in seas that remain cold without end. Below the frozen ceiling of polar seas, life gathers in quiet abundance. The water may appear harsh and empty from above, yet beneath the ice, a complex web of organisms moves through the dim layers. Fish drift through these cold currents, small crustaceans cluster in shifting clouds, and larger predators travel patiently through this hidden world in search of food. Cold water holds large quantities of dissolved oxygen, creating conditions where many species of fish can thrive. These animals often move slowly through the frigid environment, conserving energy while feeding on smaller organisms that drift through the sea. Some remain near the underside of the ice, where tiny plants and microorganisms grow during the brief return of sunlight. These communities of fish form an important part of the polar food web. Their presence supports the hunting patterns of birds and mammals that rely on the ocean for nourishment. Beneath the ice, predators move through a world where visibility may be limited, and patience becomes an essential skill. Penguins approach this challenge with remarkable agility. Their bodies move through the water with swift, precise strokes of their flippers, allowing them to maneuver among schools of fish that weave through the cold depths. As a penguin dives, its streamlined shape reduces resistance, helping it glide rapidly toward prey. The bird's vision remains adapted to underwater light, allowing it to track quick flashes of movement as fish shift direction. With sudden bursts of speed, a penguin can change course sharply, closing the distance between itself and its target. A successful pursuit often ends with a quick snap of the beak before the bird continues searching for the next opportunity. Seals follow a different approach during their hunts beneath the ice. Their movements are often slower and more deliberate, guided by senses that detect subtle signals within the surrounding water. Sensitive whiskers respond to minute vibrations created by swimming fish, allowing the seal to perceive the motion of prey even when visibility fades. When these signals reach the whiskers, the seal adjusts its path with smooth movements of its flippers. A sudden acceleration may follow as the animal closes in on its quarry. The seal's flexible body twists easily through the water, allowing it to pursue prey through narrow spaces beneath the ice. While penguins and seals hunt individual fish or small groups, whales focus on a different source of nourishment. In certain seasons, the cold oceans become filled with enormous swarms of krill. These small crustaceans gather in dense formations that can stretch across vast areas of water. Whales move slowly through these living clouds. Baleen plates lining their mouths act as natural filters, allowing water to flow out while trapping the tiny animals within. With each pass through a swarm, the whale collects thousands of krill, transforming the dense gathering of small creatures into energy that sustains its massive body. These feeding events often occur where ocean currents concentrate nutrients and support the growth of microscopic life. The resulting abundance ripples through the ecosystem, drawing predators from distant waters to take advantage of the seasonal bounty. Within this layered environment, hunting becomes a continuous exchange between predator and prey. Fish scatter through shifting schools, penguins and seals pursue them with practiced skill, and whales glide through immense krill swarms that pulse quietly through the sea. Beneath the polar ice, the ocean reveals a landscape rich with movement and opportunity. Each predator navigates this hidden world using its own strategies, shaped by the demands of cold water and the rhythms of life that unfold far below the frozen surface. In the polar ocean, one of the most important creatures is so small that it often passes unnoticed by human eyes. Drifting through the cold currents are tiny crustaceans known as Antarctic krill. Individually, they measure only a few centimeters in length, yet together they form immense living populations that shape the entire ecosystem of the southern seas. Krill gather in vast swarms that move slowly through the water like shifting clouds. These groups can stretch for kilometers, containing millions upon millions of individuals suspended within the currents. From a distance, the swarm appears almost like a moving haze beneath the surface, each animal pulsing its small legs in steady rhythm as the group travels through the ocean. The success of krill in these frigid waters is closely tied to the seasonal patterns of the Antarctic environment. When sunlight returns after the long winter darkness, microscopic plants known as phytoplankton begin to flourish near the ocean's surface. These tiny organisms capture energy from sunlight and transform it into living tissue, creating the base of the polar food web. Krill feed directly on this abundance. Using delicate filtering structures near their mouths, they collect the microscopic plants drifting through the water. The cold temperatures of the Antarctic Ocean help maintain high concentrations of nutrients that support these blooms of phytoplankton. As the plants multiply, krill populations expand alongside them. Sea ice also contributes to this process. Along the underside of the ice, algae grow in thin layers where faint sunlight penetrates the frozen surface. Krill gather beneath these areas to graze on the algae, especially during seasons when food becomes scarce in open water. The ice, therefore, becomes more than a barrier between ocean and air. It also serves as a platform that supports the growth of microscopic life. Through this combination of sunlight, nutrients, and ice-bound algae, krill find steady nourishment even in a region that appears harsh and empty. Their ability to thrive in cold water allows their numbers to reach extraordinary levels. In some areas, the total mass of krill rivals that of the largest fish populations found anywhere on Earth. These vast swarms support an entire community of predators. Many animals that inhabit the Antarctic seas rely directly on krill as their primary food source. Penguins dive repeatedly into the cold water to capture them, snapping the small crustaceans from the drifting clouds with swift movements of their beaks. Seals also feed on krill, particularly species that hunt within regions where these swarms concentrate. Their underwater pursuits may target both krill and the fish that gather to feed upon them. In this way, krill provide nourishment not only directly, but also through the animals that consume them. For whales, the importance of krill becomes even more dramatic. Enormous baleen whales travel great distances each year to reach Antarctic waters, where krill gather in immense numbers. With each feeding pass, a whale opens its mouth and draws in large volumes of water filled with these tiny animals. Baleen plates filter the water outward while the krill remain trapped inside. Though each individual krill is small, the density of the swarms allows whales to consume vast quantities during these feeding periods. Over time, this nourishment supports the enormous bodies of animals that rank among the largest ever to exist. In this way, the entire polar ecosystem rests upon the quiet presence of these small drifting crustaceans. From penguins to seals to whales, countless animals depend on the energy that begins with phytoplankton and flows through krill into larger forms of life. Within the cold waters surrounding Antarctica, Antarctic krill become the living bridge between microscopic plants and the giants of the sea. Their countless movements through the currents sustain a web of life that unfolds beneath the frozen horizons of the Southern Ocean. For much of the year in the polar regions, the sun withdraws from the sky. The long arc of daylight that once circled the horizon slowly disappears, replaced by an extended season of darkness known as the polar night. During these months, the ocean's surface lies beneath dim twilight or complete darkness, and the frozen landscapes above become quiet under the faint glow of distant stars. The disappearance of sunlight follows a gradual rhythm created by the tilt of Earth's axis. As the planet moves through its orbit, the poles lean away from the sun during winter. In Antarctica and the Arctic alike, this shift allows night to stretch far beyond the ordinary cycle of day and evening. Weeks may pass before the sun briefly touches the horizon again. Despite the absence of sunlight, the ocean below remains active. Beneath the surface, animals continue their movements through layers of cold water, where life persists even without direct light. Fish drift through the dark currents, while predators navigate through the depths in search of food. Hunting during these months requires adaptations that go beyond simple vision. In polar waters, many animals depend on senses capable of detecting subtle changes within their environment. Sound travels efficiently through water, and the quiet pulses of movement produced by swimming prey can carry through the surrounding sea. Marine mammals rely on hearing that is finely tuned to these signals. Seals, for instance, detect faint disturbances created by the movement of fish or other small animals nearby. Vibrations traveling through the water reach sensitive structures around the head, providing clues about the direction and distance of potential prey. Whales also use sound as a powerful tool for navigating and locating food within dark waters. Some species produce sequences of clicks or calls that travel outward through the sea. When these sounds encounter objects or animals, faint echoes return, carrying information about the surroundings. Through this process, the whale builds a detailed awareness of its environment, even when light is absent. Penguins diving beneath the ice rely on additional sensory cues. While their eyes remain adapted to dim underwater light, they also respond to motion and contrast within the surrounding water. Even small variations in brightness can reveal the presence of fish moving through the darkness. Combined with swift swimming ability, this visual sensitivity allows them to capture prey despite the limited light. Other animals detect chemical signals that drift through the ocean currents. Certain fish and invertebrates release molecules into the surrounding water as they move. Predators capable of sensing these subtle traces can follow them toward potential meals, navigating through darkness, guided by the invisible pathways carried within the sea. The structure of the polar ocean itself also provides orientation during the long night. Beneath floating ice, the surface above creates a faint pattern of shadow and reflection that changes with currents and tides. Experienced hunters learn to move through this environment with quiet familiarity, adjusting their paths as the water shifts. Although the polar night appears silent and still from the frozen surface, beneath the ice, a complex world continues to function. Animals move through the darkness with senses refined for a life where sunlight may disappear for extended periods. Through sound, motion detection, and chemical signals, predators locate prey in an environment where vision alone cannot guide them. These sensory adaptations allow life to continue through months when the sun remains hidden beyond the horizon. Within the long darkness of polar winter, the ocean does not fall silent. Instead, it becomes a realm where animals rely on finely tuned perceptions to navigate, hunt, and survive until the slow return of light begins once more. Across the vast oceans of Earth, certain journeys unfold with quiet persistence year after year. These movements stretch across entire hemispheres, linking distant seas through paths that living creatures follow with remarkable precision. In cold marine regions, migration becomes one of the most important strategies that animals use to balance survival, feeding, and reproduction. Among the most impressive travelers of the ocean are whales. Their migrations cover immense distances that may span thousands of miles between feeding grounds and breeding areas. These journeys follow seasonal rhythms shaped by changes in temperature, food availability, and the life cycles of the animals themselves. During certain months, Whales travel toward polar waters where the ocean becomes extraordinarily rich in food. Cold seas support vast blooms of microscopic life that form the base of a productive ecosystem. Tiny plants drifting near the surface multiply rapidly during the brief seasons when sunlight returns, creating a surge of energy that spreads upward through the food web. Krill and small fish gather in response to this abundance, forming dense populations that drift through the water in shifting groups. For whales, these gatherings represent an opportunity to feed on a scale rarely found elsewhere in the ocean. The animals spend long periods moving slowly through these regions, consuming large quantities of prey. The feeding season in cold waters allows whales to build substantial reserves of energy within their bodies. These reserves accumulate gradually as the animals continue to feed throughout the productive months. Thick layers of stored lipids grow beneath the skin, providing both insulation and metabolic fuel for the months that follow. Eventually, the seasons begin to shift. As the sun's angle changes and daylight decreases, productivity in polar waters declines. Food becomes less concentrated, and the once abundant feeding grounds grow quieter. At this point, many whales begin their long migration away from the poles. Their destination often lies in warmer regions far to the north or south of the feeding grounds. These lower latitude waters provide more stable conditions for breeding and giving birth. Calves enter the world in environments where temperatures are milder and the risk of cold stress is reduced during the earliest stages of life. The journey between these distant habitats requires extraordinary endurance. Whales travel steadily through open ocean, navigating routes that have been followed by generations before them. The energy gathered during the feeding season supports these migrations, allowing the animals to travel long distances even when feeding opportunities become limited along the way. Other marine animals also participate in seasonal movements through cold seas. Some species of seals shift their locations as sea ice expands and retreats throughout the year. Penguins travel between breeding colonies and productive feeding zones as ocean conditions change with the seasons. These migrations reflect a careful balance between environmental challenges and biological needs. Feeding grounds must provide enough nourishment to support large bodies and growing offspring, while breeding areas must offer conditions suitable for raising young. No single location satisfies both needs throughout the entire year. By moving between distant regions, animals take advantage of seasonal changes that transform the ocean's productivity. Cold polar waters become temporary centers of abundance, while warmer seas provide safer environments for reproduction. Across the frozen oceans, migration weaves these separate places into a connected system. Each year, the great journeys repeat as whales and other animals follow ancient routes through waters shaped by ice, currents, and shifting sunlight. Within these long passages across the sea, movement itself becomes part of survival. Migration allows life to flow between the coldest feeding grounds and the calmer waters where new generations begin. New life in the polar oceans begins within an environment that offers little margin for weakness. The surrounding water remains intensely cold, storms move across the surface with steady force, and food can shift with the changing seasons. Yet many marine animals bring their young into this demanding world, relying on carefully evolved strategies that allow the next generation to grow strong enough to survive. Among the largest of these young animals are whale calves. When a calf is born, it enters the ocean already measuring several meters in length, yet it must still grow rapidly in order to withstand the challenges of the sea. The mother provides nourishment through milk that contains extraordinary concentrations of fat and nutrients. Each feeding delivers a dense supply of energy that allows the calf to gain mass quickly. This rapid growth serves several purposes. A larger body holds warmth more effectively, reducing the rate at which heat escapes into the surrounding water. As the calf grows, the increasing thickness of insulating tissue beneath its skin provides additional protection against the cold. Within a relatively short period, the young whale transforms from a vulnerable newborn into a powerful swimmer capable of traveling beside its mother. Seal pups experience a similar need for rapid development. Many species give birth on stable ice or along remote shorelines where the surrounding environment remains severe. At birth, the pup often carries a thick coat or a layer of stored fat that helps protect it from the cold air and nearby water. During the early weeks of life, the mother seal provides milk that is exceptionally rich in lipids. These nutrients allow the pup to accumulate substantial fat reserves in a short amount of time. The growing layer of fat becomes both insulation and a source of stored energy, preparing the young seal for the moment when it must begin hunting on its own. As the pup matures, its body gradually changes to suit life in the sea. The early fat stores support its development until it gains the strength and coordination required for swimming and diving. Within a matter of weeks or months, depending on the species, the young seal enters the water with abilities that allow it to pursue prey beneath the surface. Penguins raise their young through a different but equally remarkable approach. Penguin chicks hatch into an environment where cold winds sweep across the ice and food must be gathered from distant waters. At first, the chicks remain sheltered beneath the bodies of their parents, where warmth from the adult's feathers protects them from the surrounding air. As the chicks grow, they develop soft down feathers that provide insulation during the early stages of life. Parents travel repeatedly between the colony and the ocean, returning with food stored in their stomachs. This nourishment sustains the chick while it continues to grow within the protection of the group. Colonies themselves play a role in survival. Large gatherings of penguins create shared warmth that reduces the exposure of individual chicks to cold conditions. Within these crowded communities, the young birds gradually gain strength and develop the waterproof feathers they will need for life in the sea. Across the polar oceans, raising young requires both parental investment and rapid development. Whale calves grow quickly through nutrient-rich milk. Seal pups build protective fat reserves, and penguin chicks depend on careful shelter and feeding within their colonies. Through these different strategies, animals ensure that their offspring can endure the demanding conditions of cold oceans. Growth becomes a race against the surrounding environment, with each young animal gradually acquiring the size, insulation, and strength needed to survive within the frozen seas. Protection for the youngest animals in polar seas often begins with something simple and constant: the steady warmth carried within a parent's body. In environments where water and air remain relentlessly cold, mothers become living sources of heat, nourishment, and shelter for their offspring during the earliest stages of life. Warm blood circulating through a parent's body maintains a stable internal temperature even when the surrounding ocean remains near freezing. When a mother stays close to her young, this warmth can pass gradually through contact and shared space. The young animal rests beside or beneath the adult, absorbing heat that radiates through skin, feathers, or fur. Among marine mammals, this transfer of warmth becomes especially important during the earliest days after birth. Whale calves, for instance, often swim close to their mothers, sheltered within the gentle slipstream created by the larger body. This position not only reduces the effort required for swimming, but also places the calf near a continuous source of warmth. The mother's milk provides another powerful form of protection. In whales and seals, this milk contains extremely high concentrations of fat. Each feeding delivers a dense supply of energy that allows the young animal to grow rapidly, while also building insulating tissue beneath the skin. The energy contained in this nourishment supports both development and the production of internal heat. Seal mothers often nurse their pups on stable ice or sheltered shores where the young can rest without entering the cold ocean immediately. During this time, the pup feeds frequently, accumulating thick layers of fat that will later help protect it once it begins swimming independently. The mother may remain nearby for days or weeks, guarding the pup while it grows stronger. Penguin mothers and fathers share similar responsibilities in the frozen landscapes of the Antarctic. Chicks remain sheltered beneath the bodies of their parents during the earliest stages of life. Feathers of the adult create a protective canopy where the chick experiences warmth and shelter from the wind. When the parent returns from feeding at sea, it provides nourishment stored within its stomach. The chick receives this food directly, gaining the energy required to grow and maintain its own body temperature. Through repeated journeys between ocean and colony, the parent sustains the young bird during its most vulnerable period. These acts of care require significant energy from the parents themselves. Producing rich milk, traveling long distances to find food, and maintaining close contact with growing offspring all demand substantial metabolic resources. The energy stored during feeding seasons must support not only the parent's survival, but also the development of the young. For whales, this commitment becomes evident during the months when mothers guide their calves through long migrations. Even while traveling across vast distances, the mother continues to provide milk that fuels the calf's rapid growth. Each feeding represents a transfer of stored energy from one generation to the next. Seal mothers also invest heavily during the nursing period. The rich milk they produce contains so much fat that pups can gain weight quickly within a relatively short time. This rapid accumulation of energy reserves prepares the young seal for the moment when it must begin life in the water. Through these strategies, warmth and nourishment flow directly from parent to offspring. The body of the mother becomes both shelter and sustenance, allowing the young animal to grow within conditions that would otherwise challenge its survival. Across the polar oceans, parenting unfolds as a careful exchange of energy and protection. Through warmth, feeding, and constant presence, mothers ensure that their young can endure the cold world, awaiting them beyond the safety of their care. Across the polar oceans, the frozen surface rarely remains still for long. What appears from a distance to be a solid white landscape is often a shifting mosaic of drifting plates, narrow channels, and fractured edges. Sea ice moves constantly under the influence of winds, tides, and ocean currents, creating a dynamic environment where animals must navigate carefully through changing conditions. Large sections of ice form broad floes that float upon the water like enormous rafts. These floes drift slowly across the ocean, sometimes traveling many kilometers over the course of days or weeks. When winds strengthen or currents shift direction, the floes can press together with immense force. Edges grind against one another, producing ridges where thick slabs of ice pile upward and downward at the same time. These movements reshape the frozen surface continually. Wide openings of dark water may appear between drifting flows, only to close again as the ice shifts. For animals that depend on access to the ocean below, or to breathing holes within the ice, these changes require constant awareness of the surrounding environment. Seals and penguins that rest upon the ice must remain attentive to these slow rearrangements, A resting flow may drift far from its original position, carrying the animals across stretches of ocean while currents quietly guide the frozen platform. When pressure builds between neighboring flows, cracks may form suddenly, altering the pathways that animals use to reach the water. The underside of the ice changes as well. Beneath the surface, jagged structures known as ice keels extend downward into the sea. These formations create a complex underwater landscape that animals must move through carefully while swimming or diving below the ice. Above this shifting world, polar storms add another layer of challenge. Winds can rise quickly across the open ocean, sweeping across the frozen surface with powerful gusts. Snow lifts from the ice and spins through the air in wide arcs, reducing visibility across the landscape. During such storms, the boundary between sky and surface becomes difficult to distinguish. Penguins traveling across the ice may rely on subtle cues of wind direction and memory of familiar terrain to find their way back toward the colony or the water's edge. Even experienced animals move cautiously through these conditions. Storms also influence the ocean itself. Strong winds can drive waves against the edges of sea ice, breaking large flows into smaller fragments. The shifting pieces drift apart and then collide again as currents move them across the water. Animals swimming nearby must navigate these moving barriers as they travel through the sea. For marine mammals that dive beneath the ice, the position of breathing holes becomes especially important during rough weather. Ice that shifts unexpectedly can alter the location of these openings or cover them entirely. Animals must locate alternative routes to the surface, relying on memory and spatial awareness to reach areas where air remains accessible. Despite these risks, many species have adapted to life within this restless environment. Their movements across ice and through water reflect long familiarity with the patterns of storms and drifting flows. Experience teaches them how to recognize subtle changes in wind, current, and ice formation. The polar oceans therefore remain places of both opportunity and danger. Sea ice offers resting platforms and shelter for many animals, yet it also shifts continually under the forces of nature. Storms sweep across the region with powerful winds that reshape the frozen landscape. Within this environment, survival depends on the ability to respond to constant change. Animals living among the ice move with awareness of the shifting world around them, adjusting their paths as the sea and weather quietly transform the polar horizon. In the cold oceans near the poles, survival often unfolds within a quiet balance between hunter and hunted. Beneath drifting ice and across open water, predators move through the sea with patience shaped by long familiarity with the rhythms of this environment. Each pursuit becomes part of a wider system where energy passes steadily from one life to another. Among the most formidable predators in polar waters are orcas, also known as killer whales. These powerful marine mammals travel in coordinated groups, their dark dorsal fins cutting through the ocean surface as they move together through the sea. Orcas rely on cooperation and communication during their hunts, sharing information through sounds that travel easily through water. Their diet varies across different populations, yet in polar regions, seals and sometimes even large whales become part of their prey. Orcas approach these hunts with remarkable coordination. Members of the group may spread out through the water, guiding the target toward companions waiting nearby. In certain situations, they even work together to disturb ice flows, creating waves that wash resting seals into the water. Once the prey enters the sea, the pursuit unfolds beneath the surface. Orcas move with speed and precision, their powerful tails driving them forward, while their keen senses track every movement of the fleeing animal. Through teamwork and endurance, they transform the hunt into a shared effort where each member of the group plays a role. Another predator that patrols the Antarctic waters is the leopard seal. With its long body and powerful jaws, this animal moves through the sea with silent control. Leopard seals often hunt alone, relying on stealth rather than cooperation as they search for prey near the edges of sea ice. Penguins frequently become part of their diet. As penguins enter the water from the ice, leopard seals may approach from below, watching carefully for the right moment to strike. The seal's flexible body allows it to maneuver quickly through the water, closing the distance between itself and the swimming bird. The pursuit may unfold in sudden bursts of motion. Penguins attempt to evade capture through rapid turns and bursts of speed, while the leopard seal twists and accelerates through the water in response. In many cases, the seal succeeds, securing a meal that supports its continued survival within the demanding polar ecosystem. These interactions between predator and prey form part of a larger network of relationships that connects many species. Energy captured by microscopic plants flows upward through krill and fish into larger animals such as penguins, seals, and whales. Predators then feed upon these animals, transferring that energy further along the chain. Each link within this system depends upon those that come before it. Krill swarms support fish and seabirds. Fish sustain penguins and seals. Larger predators like orcas may feed upon both seals and whales. Through these connections, the polar oceans maintain a complex web of life where every organism plays a role. Despite the harshness of the environment, this network remains balanced through countless interactions that repeat across seasons and generations. Predators remove weaker individuals from prey populations, while the availability of prey shapes the movements and behavior of hunters. Within the quiet depths of cold seas, these relationships continue without pause. Orcas move through open water in coordinated groups, leopard seals patrol beneath drifting ice, and penguins dive through the ocean in search of food while remaining alert to danger. Together, these animals form a dynamic system where survival emerges through adaptation, awareness, and the steady exchange of energy between living creatures. In the polar oceans, the presence of predators becomes an essential force that shapes the delicate balance of life beneath the frozen horizon. Long before the modern polar oceans took their present form, the ancestors of today's marine mammals lived in very different environments. Their earliest histories unfolded on land, where movement across solid ground shaped the structure of their bodies and the rhythm of their lives. Over immense stretches of time, however, certain lineages began a gradual return to the sea. This transition did not occur quickly. Evolution works through countless small changes accumulating across generations. Animals that ventured closer to coastal waters gained access to new food sources found in shallow seas. Individuals whose bodies allowed them to swim more efficiently or remain in water longer often gained an advantage in these environments. Across millions of years, these gradual adjustments began to reshape entire groups of animals. Limbs that once supported weight on land slowly transformed into structures better suited for swimming. Bones became lighter in some areas and more streamlined in others. Tails and flippers developed into powerful tools for movement through water. Fossil evidence preserves fragments of this long transformation. In ancient sediments, paleontologists have uncovered the remains of early marine mammals that reveal stages of adaptation between land and sea. Some fossils show animals with limbs still capable of walking, yet with bodies already adapted for swimming. Others display more advanced aquatic features, including elongated bodies and reduced hind limbs. Among the most well-known examples are early ancestors of whales. These animals once walked on land tens of millions of years ago, before gradually transitioning into fully aquatic forms. Fossils discovered in regions that were once ancient coastlines reveal creatures with long bodies and limbs capable of paddling through shallow water while still retaining the ability to move on land. As generations passed, the aquatic lifestyle became increasingly dominant. Hind limbs diminished, forelimbs evolved into flippers, and the tail developed strong muscles capable of propelling the body through open water. Eventually, these animals became completely adapted to life in the sea, giving rise to the whales that inhabit today's oceans. Seals and sea lions followed a different evolutionary path. Their ancestors were carnivorous mammals that likely hunted along coastlines and river systems. Over time, these animals developed features that allowed them to move efficiently, both on land and in water. Their limbs transformed into flippers, while retaining enough flexibility to support movement across ice and shorelines. These evolutionary pathways unfolded over millions of years as natural selection favored individuals best suited to marine environments. Cold oceans in particular exerted strong pressure on animals entering the sea. The ability to maintain body temperature, store energy, and move efficiently through water became essential traits for survival. As marine mammals adapted to colder regions, additional changes emerged. Thick insulating tissues developed beneath the skin, allowing warmth to remain within the body despite the surrounding water. Circulatory systems evolved mechanisms that helped conserve heat by directing blood flow carefully between the core and extremities. Body size also increased in many lineages, offering further protection against the rapid loss of heat in cold environments. Larger bodies retained warmth more effectively, allowing animals to explore higher latitudes where food resources could be abundant. Over immense spans of geological time, these adaptations allowed marine mammals to expand into some of the coldest oceans on Earth. Fossil records show how the ancestors of modern whales, seals, and other marine species gradually transformed as they adapted to life in water. The creatures that now swim through polar seas represent the result of this long evolutionary history. Their bodies carry the marks of countless generations that slowly shaped limbs, circulation, insulation, and behavior. Within the cold oceans of today, these animals continue a story that began millions of years ago. Their presence reflects the patient work of evolution, where small changes accumulated across deep time to produce creatures capable of thriving in one of the most demanding environments on the planet. Energy moves through the polar oceans like a quiet current, passing from one living body to another. In cold seas, this movement becomes especially important because maintaining warmth demands constant fuel. For animals whose bodies remain warmer than the surrounding water, survival depends on the steady conversion of food into energy. Warm-blooded creatures generate heat through metabolism, the internal chemistry that transforms nutrients into motion and warmth. Every heartbeat, muscle contraction, and breath depends on this flow of energy. In cold oceans, the challenge grows greater because the surrounding water draws heat away from the body with persistent efficiency. To maintain a stable internal temperature, marine animals must replace this lost heat continuously. The energy required to do so comes from food. For species living in polar environments, the number of calories needed each day can be immense. Large bodies require substantial energy, not only to move through water, but also to sustain the warmth of muscles and organs. Whales represent one of the most striking examples of these demands. The immense mass of their bodies requires a steady supply of nourishment, especially during feeding seasons in cold regions. When whales reach polar waters, they often devote long hours each day to feeding, moving slowly through areas where prey gathers in dense concentrations. Among the most important of these prey are Antarctic krill. Though small in size, krill occur in enormous numbers that allow whales to consume them in vast quantities. A single feeding whale may take in thousands of these tiny crustaceans during one pass through a swarm. Over the course of a day, the total intake can reach remarkable levels. Blue whales in particular depend heavily on krill to support their enormous bodies. During the productive months of the polar summer, an adult blue whale may consume several tons of krill each day. This feeding provides the calories necessary to maintain metabolism, sustain movement, and build reserves of energy that will support future migrations. The relationship between whales and krill reflects a larger pattern within the polar ecosystem. Small organisms capture energy from sunlight through photosynthesis, forming the base of the marine food web. Krill feed upon these microscopic plants, converting that energy into their own bodies. Larger animals then feed upon the krill, transferring the energy upward through the ecosystem. Seals and penguins also depend on steady food intake to maintain warmth in cold waters. These animals hunt fish, squid, and crustaceans that supply the nutrients required for both movement and temperature regulation. Each successful hunt contributes to the energy balance that allows them to remain active within the frigid environment. Periods of abundant food become especially important for building reserves. When prey is plentiful, animals accumulate stored energy within layers of fat or blubber. These reserves serve multiple purposes. They provide insulation against the cold and act as a source of fuel when feeding becomes less reliable. For migratory species, these stored reserves support long journeys between feeding and breeding grounds. During travel or reproduction, animals may rely on previously accumulated energy while food intake decreases temporarily. The constant demand for energy shapes nearly every aspect of life in polar seas. Feeding patterns, migration routes, and hunting behaviors all reflect the need to gather sufficient calories to maintain warmth and activity in cold water. Within this environment, food becomes more than nourishment. It becomes the foundation that sustains life in seas where the loss of heat never fully stops. Through the steady exchange of energy between prey and predator, animals continue to thrive in some of the coldest oceans on Earth. Across the polar seas, subtle changes have begun to reshape the environment that countless animals depend upon. The cold oceans remain vast and powerful, yet the balance that once defined their seasonal rhythms is slowly shifting. In recent decades, scientists observing these regions have recorded transformations that ripple through the delicate systems, sustaining life beneath the ice. One of the most visible changes appears in the extent of sea ice. During the colder months, frozen ocean once expanded across enormous areas surrounding both poles. These ice fields formed essential platforms for many species, offering resting places, breeding grounds, and protection from predators. The ice also shaped the patterns of currents and the growth of microscopic organisms that form the base of the marine food web. In many regions today, the seasonal ice does not extend as far as it once did. Warmer atmospheric and ocean temperatures cause portions of this ice to melt earlier in the year and form later during the winter. As a result, the period when ice covers the ocean surface becomes shorter. This reduction alters more than the appearance of the polar landscape. Beneath the ice, complex communities of algae grow along the frozen underside. These microscopic plants use faint sunlight to produce energy that feeds small organisms drifting in the water below. When the ice changes, the timing and abundance of these algae can shift as well. Krill, which depend heavily on these microscopic food sources, may experience changes in their populations as these patterns adjust. Because krill serve as a central link within the polar ecosystem, variations in their abundance can influence many larger animals that depend upon them for nourishment. Penguins, seals, and whales all rely on stable feeding grounds supported by this intricate web of life. When the distribution of prey changes, these animals may need to travel farther or alter their traditional feeding routes in order to find sufficient food. Such adjustments require additional energy and can affect the success of breeding and raising young. Sea ice also plays a direct role in the lives of several species. Some seals give birth upon stable ice platforms where their pups remain protected from predators and waves. Penguins use ice as resting areas during their journeys between colonies and feeding waters. When the ice becomes thinner or more fragmented, these essential habitats may become less reliable. Changes in temperature can influence ocean currents as well. Warmer water entering polar regions may shift the circulation patterns that distribute nutrients through the sea. Because these nutrients support the growth of microscopic plants, any alteration in their movement can affect the productivity of the entire ecosystem. Despite these challenges, many polar animals continue to display remarkable resilience. Their histories are shaped by long periods of environmental change across geological time. Species have adapted repeatedly as climates shifted and ice advanced or retreated during earlier eras. Yet, the pace of current changes presents new uncertainties. Ecosystems that depend upon precise seasonal timing may struggle to adjust quickly when ice formation, prey availability, and migration patterns shift within relatively short periods. Scientists studying the polar oceans continue to observe these developments with careful attention. By tracking ice coverage, monitoring animal populations, and studying ocean chemistry, researchers seek to understand how these ecosystems respond to changing conditions. Within the cold oceans of Earth, life remains intertwined with the cycles of ice, sunlight, and water that define the polar environment. As these cycles evolve, the animals that inhabit these regions must adjust their movements, feeding patterns, and breeding behaviors in response. The polar seas, therefore, remain places of both endurance and transformation. Beneath the drifting ice and within the cold currents, living creatures continue their quiet existence while the broader environment around them gradually changes. Far from the crowded coastlines of the world, the polar oceans remain among the least explored regions on Earth. Their waters stretch across immense distances, often hidden beneath drifting ice and long seasons of darkness. Yet in recent decades, a growing number of scientific expeditions have ventured into these remote seas, seeking to understand the delicate systems that sustain life within them. Research vessels travel carefully through polar waters, navigating narrow openings between floating ice. These ships carry teams of scientists equipped with instruments designed to measure the ocean's temperature, chemistry, and biological activity. Beneath the surface, remotely operated vehicles descend into cold depths, recording images and collecting samples from environments rarely seen by human eyes. Through these expeditions, researchers gather knowledge about the creatures that inhabit polar ecosystems. Sensors track the movements of whales across vast distances, revealing migration routes that connect feeding grounds and breeding areas. Small devices attached to seals and penguins record diving patterns, showing how these animals move through the water in search of prey. Other studies focus on the smallest organisms in the ocean. Microscopic plankton drifting through the water play a crucial role in supporting the entire food web. By examining changes in their abundance and distribution, scientists gain insight into the health of the polar ecosystem as a whole. Data collected during these journeys contribute to a clearer understanding of how polar oceans function. Temperature measurements reveal subtle shifts within ocean currents, while chemical analyses help researchers track nutrients that support marine life. Over time, these observations form a detailed picture of the processes that shape life in these cold seas. Alongside research efforts, conservation initiatives have begun to focus more strongly on protecting polar environments. International agreements now designate certain areas of the ocean as marine protected zones where fishing and other activities are limited. These regions serve as refuges where ecosystems can continue functioning with minimal disturbance. Protecting such areas helps preserve feeding grounds used by many animals during crucial stages of their life cycles. When krill populations remain stable and fish communities thrive, larger predators such as whales, seals, and seabirds can continue to find the nourishment they require. Conservation programs also aim to reduce pressures created by human activity in polar regions. Shipping routes passing through icy waters are monitored carefully to avoid disturbances to wildlife. Guidelines help prevent pollution from reaching fragile ecosystems that recover slowly from environmental damage. Scientific knowledge and conservation work often move forward together. Observations gathered by researchers inform policies designed to safeguard marine habitats. In turn, protected areas allow scientists to observe ecosystems that remain relatively undisturbed, providing valuable insights into how polar seas function under natural conditions. Education and international cooperation also play important roles in protecting these environments. Nations share research findings and collaborate on long-term monitoring projects that track changes in polar oceans over time. Through these shared efforts, knowledge gained in one region can contribute to broader understanding across both poles. Within the cold oceans of the Arctic and Antarctic, life continues to unfold in patterns shaped by ice, currents, and seasonal light. Research expeditions reveal the complexity of these systems, while conservation initiatives aim to ensure that the delicate balance supporting them remains intact. The future of life in polar seas will depend on the continued care and understanding applied to these remote environments. Through careful study and responsible stewardship, the remarkable creatures that inhabit these waters may continue their quiet existence beneath drifting ice and vast polar skies. In the remote waters surrounding the poles, countless generations of animals have endured conditions that might seem unwelcoming to life. The cold remains constant, the seasons shift between endless daylight and long darkness, and the landscape itself moves as ice forms and drifts across the ocean. Yet within this demanding environment, living creatures continue their quiet existence, shaped by the steady influence of time and adaptation. The bodies of these animals reveal the patient work of evolution. Across many thousands of generations, natural selection has favored traits that allow warmth to remain within living tissue even while surrounded by freezing water. Insulating layers beneath the skin, specialized circulatory systems, and carefully balanced metabolism all contribute to survival in seas where heat escapes easily. Each adaptation reflects an accumulation of small changes that proved useful in the environment where these animals live. A slightly thicker insulating layer, a more efficient way of storing oxygen, or a subtle adjustment in behavior could allow one individual to endure conditions more successfully than another. Over long periods of time, these advantages become part of the species itself. Through this gradual process, life has learned to inhabit environments that appear at first glance too severe for survival. Polar oceans demonstrate how organisms can reshape their bodies and behaviors to match the conditions around them. What seems harsh from a human perspective becomes simply another landscape where life finds its balance. The resilience displayed by polar animals extends beyond individual traits. Entire ecosystems have formed in response to the rhythms of ice, sunlight, and nutrient-rich waters. Small organisms drifting near the surface transform sunlight into living energy, which then passes upward through layers of predators and prey. Krill gather in immense swarms, fish move through the cold currents, and larger animals travel across great distances to feed where resources become abundant. Each participant plays a role within this interconnected system, demonstrating how life organizes itself even within the most challenging environments. These relationships also reveal the importance of timing. The brief return of sunlight to polar seas triggers bursts of productivity that sustain entire food webs. Animals synchronize their migrations, feeding, and reproduction with these cycles, allowing them to take advantage of the periods when food becomes plentiful. Such coordination reflects an understanding shaped not by conscious planning, but by evolutionary memory carried within behavior. Over generations, species have adapted their life cycles to match the rhythms of the polar world. The result is a complex harmony between living creatures and the environment they inhabit. Observing these animals offers insight into the broader capacity of life to adapt. Conditions that appear inhospitable can still support thriving ecosystems when organisms develop the traits necessary to survive there. The polar oceans illustrate how flexibility and gradual change allow species to persist even under extreme circumstances. This resilience also highlights the interconnected nature of living systems. The survival of larger animals often depends upon the stability of smaller organisms that form the foundation of the ecosystem. When these lower levels remain healthy, the entire structure above them can continue to flourish. Within the coldest oceans on Earth, animals demonstrate the quiet persistence of life in environments shaped by ice and darkness. Their bodies, behaviors, and migrations reveal a long history of adaptation to conditions that require constant balance between energy, warmth, and survival. Through these examples, the polar seas remind us that life possesses an extraordinary ability to adjust to the world around it. Across deep time and changing climates, organisms continue to evolve solutions that allow them to endure, even in the coldest waters beneath the distant polar skies. Far from warm coastlines and familiar waters, the coldest oceans on Earth continue their slow and silent motion beneath drifting ice. In these distant regions, life unfolds in ways that reveal the remarkable flexibility of living systems. Creatures that inhabit these waters do not simply endure the cold. Their bodies, behaviors, and life cycles have been shaped to exist comfortably within it. Across the previous passages of this journey, a pattern quietly emerged. Warm-blooded animals living in polar seas rely on a delicate balance of adaptations that allow them to hold warmth within their bodies while surrounded by water near the freezing point. Thick layers of insulation protect vital organs, while specialized circulation carefully manages the movement of heat through limbs and flippers. Blood flows in ways that conserve warmth where it is needed most. Inside these animals, oxygen is stored with unusual efficiency, allowing long and patient dives through dark waters beneath sea ice. During these descents, metabolism slows and the body becomes economical with every breath taken at the surface. Each dive becomes a quiet exercise in balance between energy, warmth, and survival. Other species rely on dense fur or tightly layered feathers that trap thin pockets of air close to the skin. These invisible cushions become barriers against the surrounding cold. Beneath them, the steady warmth of life remains protected, even as icy currents pass nearby. Behavior also plays its part in this careful system. Animals adjust their movements, diving patterns, and feeding habits in ways that conserve energy. Some travel across vast distances between seasons, following the shifting abundance of food through polar waters. Others gather together, sharing warmth and shelter against the long darkness of winter. These strategies form a mosaic of solutions developed across millions of years. Evolution has refined them gradually, allowing animals to meet the challenges of freezing oceans with remarkable precision. Each generation inherits a body, already prepared for the environment it will enter. Beneath the surface, the ocean itself supports this living network. Tiny organisms drifting near the ice transform sunlight into energy during the brief months of polar daylight. Their abundance spreads upward through layers of life, nourishing fish, seals, birds, and the largest whales on Earth. Within this system, even the largest animals depend upon the smallest. Vast swarms of krill sustain whales, whose bodies are among the largest ever to exist. Penguins and seals pursue fish that flourish within the cold currents. Every part of the ecosystem remains linked through quiet exchanges of energy. Yet what stands out most clearly in these polar oceans is not simply survival, but resilience. Life persists in places where darkness can last for months and temperatures remain near freezing throughout the year. The organisms living there reveal how adaptable life can become when shaped by time and environmental pressure. Their presence beneath polar ice reminds us that Earth contains many worlds hidden from casual view. Vast landscapes exist below frozen surfaces, where animals move through dim water, guided by senses sharpened for the environment they inhabit. These places remain distant from human experience, yet they hold thriving communities shaped by the same biological principles that govern life everywhere. To observe the animals of the coldest oceans is to witness the quiet persistence of nature's designs. Evolution has written its solutions into muscle, blood, and behavior, allowing creatures to move through waters that would quickly drain heat from an unadapted body. In the end, the frozen seas offer a gentle reminder of the extraordinary possibilities within the natural world. Beneath drifting ice and silent winter skies, life continues its steady rhythm, shaped by cold currents and ancient cycles, enduring with calm determination in the coldest oceans on Earth.